Fine.
Yeah.
Is it visible?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
And I hope I am audible clearly.
Yes.
Okay. So at the outset, I first wish to thank my sincere thanks to the organizing team of RSDI 2021 for inviting me and allowing me to discuss the management of hyperglycemia in patients on parental and the enteral feeds. So when we all know that when patient is being hospitalized and patient is either not allowed to take orally or cannot take orally, has to be switched over to the parental or the enteral feeds due to one or the other reason. And hyperglycemia is a major challenge in these type of patients when they are being hospitalized to control or to achieve the targets. And so it is a frequent complication of enteral and parental nutrition in the hospitalized patients. It has been reported, the hyperglycemia has been reported up to 30% in patients on enteral feeds and almost more than 50% patients on the parental feeds. So this is a very huge prevalence. And this is a concern because hyperglycemia in hospitalized patients, as Madam Divya has already told us, that the hyperglycemia has to be taken care of in the post-transplant patients. So the patient, like it can affect the patient outcomes, it can affect the mortality or increase the mortality, it can increase the complications in the patient, it can increase the length of stay and overall hospital cost. And it is important that this hyperglycemia not only occurs in patients who are already known diabetic, but it can also be seen in patients who were previously undiagnosed diabetic or didn't have diabetes or were not detected diabetes. And the major challenge is that in patients who are not diabetic or not known diabetic have the higher mortality. So this is the data which shows that the new onset hyperglycemia has higher mortality rates as compared to the patient who are normoglycemic or as compared to the patient who are already known diabetic. There is a number of literature, n number of publications available which shows that the hyperglycemia is associated with the worst clinical outcomes in different numerous settings, being the patient on the total TPN, the patient on non-cardiac surgery, on the patients of the neurosurgery, patient who were admitted for any critical injury, COPD, or the community acquired pneumonia, and there is an increased risk of mortality risk, pneumonia, or other ICU-associated complications in the patients who are having hyperglycemia during their hospital stay. And the pathogenesis of this hyperglycemia during this nutritional support, whether the patient is on enteral or the parental nutrition, is very complex. There is increased hepatic glucose production, reduced glucose utilization, and there is, because of this acute illness, surgery, and trauma, and because there is an increased risk of stress mediators that interferes with carb metabolism and leads to the hyperglycemia. There is increase in the peripheral insulin resistance during stress and illness, and bed rest. When the patient is being confined to the bed, it itself decreases the glucose utilization and leads to the hyperglycemia. And it has been seen that the insulin resistance increases by 7 to 8-fold in patients undergoing any surgical procedure, largely explained by increase in glucagon, cortisol, or the counter-regulatory hormones. And finally, the excessive delivery of glucose or the gluconeogenic substrates by enteral or the parental routes in hospital patients can lead to the hyperglycemia. So what are the recommendations for these hospitalized patients? All critically ill patients in intensive care unit settings, we should have a target plasma glucose of 140 to 180, and intravenous insulin is preferred. I'm sure my next speaker, Dr. Suri, will take us through this management of the hyperglycemia in the ICU settings in the critical ill patients. And in non-critically ill patients, Dr. Shah will tell us and will be taking us through the management of non-critical but yet critical patients. So like the targets in these patients, the pre-meal less than 140, random less than 180, and sliding scale insulin should be discouraged. But whenever we are targeting this glycemic window, we should be very cautious about reducing the risk of hypoglycemia. So coming on to the enteral and parental nutrition, we know that these are provided to any patient who is malnourished or at risk of general malnutrition because of the compromised nutritional intake in the context of the duration or the severity of the disease. So enteral nutrition is preferred when the patient has an intact GI absorption. It can be short-term or a long-term. The short-term can be done by the nasogastric tube, nasoduodenal or nasojejunal tubes. Long-term can be done through the gastrostomy or jejunostomy. Whereas the parental nutrition for patients who are at risk of a deranged GI absorption, like the patient who are having intestinal obstruction, ileus, peritonitis, bowel ischemia, or the intractable vomiting, diarrhea, where we can have a short-term with the peripheral access and we can have the long-term TPN by the stencil access. So there is, in the patients who are in enteral nutrition, the risk of hyperglycemia is there. So continuous or intermittent delivery of calorie-dense nutrients might lead to the hyperglycemia. There is a wide variety of schedules like the elemental, semi-elemental, or the disease-specific enteral formulas are available. and there is increased risk of hyperglycemia because of the use of these formulas if we are not very cautious. So the recommendation that basal insulin should be ideal treatment strategy, or combined basal regular strategies can be optimal. And there is a study which has shown this. This is the data from a patients who were admitted to the acute care hospital. They were on the enteral nutrition for 15 days and they were non-diabetic. 27% patient reported 1 to 3 events of the hyperglycemia, that is blood glucose of more than 200. 6% patient reported 4 to 6 events of the hyperglycemia, and 2% patient reported hyperglycemia 7 or more events. So in patients who are on the enteral formula are admitted in the hospital can have hyperglycemia irrespective of whether they were diabetic or non-diabetic before the admission. So what should be the option of the therapy? Basal plus correction insulin. Basal can be used as a determer or glargine once a day, or the rapid acting insulin with the supplemental basal insulin if needed. Basal plus fixed dose nutrition plus correction insulin. So like if the patients, there we have to keep in mind that the basal is required, nutritional is required, and the correction insulin is required as per the blood glucose monitoring. So insulin and like we should take care of the insulin therapy for the coverage, particularly when the tube feeds abrupt slowly suddenly stop. So we should calculate the total carb calories which were given in the tube feed, assess blood glucose every 1 hour, and if it is going less than 100, we should supplement it with the dextrose containing fluids, be it D5 or D10. When coming into the parenteral nutrition, there is a continuous IV delivery of the high concentration of maybe dextrose, the carbs, the calories, the protein, the fats, the amino acids, and there is no incretin stimulation of the insulin secretion. So hyperglycemia is common. Here also the basal insulin should be the ideal treatment along with the nutritional as well as the correction. And this is the data which shows that the glycemia in patients receiving TPN, as we see that the hyperglycemia or the risk of hyperglycemia increases with the duration of the therapy, and this hyperglycemia is directly correlating with the increased mortality in the patients who are on TPN for some or the other reason. And if you see the patient outcomes in different clinical settings or in different publications, it is associated with the glucose levels, the risk of the mortality, any infection, cardiac risk, acute renal failure, septicemia, or any complication, or even the duration of the hospital stay has shown a relatively increased risk in the patients who develop hyperglycemia on the TPN. So in patients who are without diabetes, patient can develop hyperglycemia from the TPN, and it is based on the variety of factors like age, severity of illness, and the rate of the dextrose and the concentration of dextrose in that particular TPN. In individuals with pre-existing type 2 diabetes, not previously receiving insulin therapy, 77% of the patients required insulin to control glycemia during TPN. And insulin doses are required in the higher doses in the patients who are diabetic and are on TPN. So like adding incremental doses of insulin to the TPN is one option, but this may require days to determine the correct insulin dose. So the best advices or the best recommendation that we should use a separate IV infusion, and that brings many of the or majority of the patient under the target. And 2/3 to 100% of TPN, this total number of units can be added to the TPN bag on the subsequent days if we can calculate the total daily requirement. This is the Society of Hospital Medicine Glycemic Control Task Force recommendations for the patients or the preferred insulin regimes for the different nutrition situations. So patients who are nil orally or patients are on clear liquids, we can use the basal insulin, that's the 50% of the total daily dose, plus the nutritional insulin if required, if the patient is on NPO, so there is no need of nutritional insulin. Again, we can use the basal insulin, either glargine or the detamil. If the patient on the bolus tube feeds, so like patient is on tube feeding and that is to be in the bolus like 4 hourly or 6 hourly, then we can use a 40% of the total daily dose of insulin as a basal, and rest 60% to be divided in the equal doses as along with the bolus feeds. If the patient is on continuous tube feed, the basal insulin again 40% and the rest of the insulin to be in the divided doses, 4 to 6 hourly depending on the monitoring. And if the patient is on parenteral nutrition, insulin is given preferably parenterally or in the IV infusion. So like there should be a separate insulin drip which allows for the accurate dose finding, and then 80% of the amount determined as a total daily dose using drip is added to the subsequent TPN bags. So the approach to the insulin therapy during parenteral and the enteral feeds, if the patient is non-diabetic, we should monitor, and if the patient is not diabetic or not previously or not detected diabetic, we should be monitoring the blood glucose 4 to 6 hourly, and if after 24 to 48 hours patient has the normoglycemia or patient is not having hyperglycemia, we can reduce the frequency of monitoring. But if the patient is known diabetic, we should continue the monitoring 4 to 6 hourly. And depending on the patient's plasma glucose, if it is more than 180 or it is between 140 to 180, then we should define what to be the insulin therapy or the insulin dose in that particular patient. If the patient is on enteral nutrition, we should use the diabetes specific formula. As I told, there are elemental formulas, there are semi-elemental formulas, and the disease specific enteral formulas. And we should start the insulin therapy basal as per the weight we can use, or if we know the total daily dose requirement, then we can calculate on the basis of that. And the patients on parenteral nutrition therapy, we should reduce the dose of the dextrose containing fluids, or we should reduce the concentration of the dextrose in those TPN fluids. And then we should mix the regular insulin, either it is 7 to 10 units per 100 gram of dextrose if patient is known diabetic, or 5 to 7. But it all depends on the blood glucose monitoring, particularly the patient on TPN patient is critically ill. We should do it every hour. So we know that insulin is the standard of care, and it has a rapid onset of action. It is adaptable and the easy to titrate. So ideally the insulin has to be chosen, and the basal bolus therapy in the critically ill patients who are on the insul or the parenteral formulas is the therapy of choice. And as far as the targets in the ICU settings, I'm sure Dr. Suri and Dr. Saha will tell us the targets in the critical settings, in the ICU settings, in the non-critical patient. But if this data shows that if we are going very aggressive, we are increasing the mortality. So ideally, we should keep the plasma glucose between 140 to 180, and we will not that will not cause the hypoglycemia in our patients in the critical settings. And what should be done for the transition from IV to the subcutaneous insulin therapy? So we know that if you are stopping the insulin infusion, to maintain the effective blood levels of insulin, it is necessary to administer short or rapid acting insulin 1 to 2 hours subcutaneously before the discontinuation of IV infusion. And intermittent or long acting insulin must be injected at least 2 to 3 hours before discontinuing the insulin infusion. Otherwise, patient will develop hyperglycemia later on. So there should be a stepwise approach to the physiological insulin dosing. Decide if patient is appropriate for that particular protocol, and discontinue the oral antidiabetics once the patient is being admitted. If the patient is known diabetic, we should calculate the total daily dose of insulin, determine the distribution of total daily dose calculated based on the nutrition regime, and reevaluate and adjust the total daily dose based on the glycemic control of previous 24 hours. So how to calculate the total daily dose? There are 3 ways to calculate the total daily dose. Add up the total insulin dose as outpatient if the patient is already known diabetic, adjusting for the quality outpatient control, current degree of hyperglycemia, current patient status, and various other factors. If we can calculate also the total daily dose on the basis of the weight. If the patient like the patient's weight multiplied by N, whereas N stands for if the patient is malnourished, elderly, CKD, on dialysis, or severe liver disease, it is 0.3. If the patient is normal weight, including type 1, it is 0.4. If a patient is overweight, it is 0.5. And the patients who are obese, on the high dose steroids, or other markers of significant insulin resistance, it is 0.6. And otherwise, we can also calculate the total daily dose from the recent insulin infusion requirements, which were the patient was already on. These in the last 24 hours, patient is on the insulin infusion in the ICU settings. So we can calculate the total daily dose on the basis of our patient's profile, on the patient's status, known diabetic, unknown diabetic, patients on OAD, or patients on insulin. And out of this total daily dose, we can divide the 50%. The 50-50 rule is simple and generally works well, and it should be promoted. So basically 50% of the total daily dose to be given as a basal, with the rest of the 50% administered on the to cover the glycemic excursion as a nutritional intake. But here we should also keep in mind that other than this, like the basal plus the nutritional insulin, we should have an option of the correctional insulin. If the patient has severe hyperglycemia or patient has hyperglycemia in spite of this insulin doses, we should be providing, or we should be injecting a patient with the correctional insulin dose. So for the prandial insulin, we can choose the rest of the 50% depending on the bolus or depending on the nutritional intake, depending on the amount of nutrition, depending on the calorie or the carb content of that particular nutrition. If the patient is on enteral nutrition, we should divide the dose of the prandial insulin in 3 or 4 meals if the patient is on the, like, say, 4 hourly or 6 hourly tube feeds. So the types of insulin which we are using the basal insulin and the rapid acting or the insulin locks in the hospital setting for this. And we should have this the correction insulin in mind, but particularly when the patient is not controlled with the nutritional as well as the basal insulin. The dictum is that, as Madam Divya has already said, that we should be proactive. And anticipatory of the insulin or the anticipatory insulin needs we should know, and we should give insulin in anticipation and rather than be reactive to the hyperglycemia. Otherwise, we can increase the risk of complications in our patient. So the unexpected hyperglycemic expressions are common, and the use of correction remains a pervasive and the arguably logical practice. If correction insulin is used, it should be ordered as a separate step, and the dose of scheduled insulin should be adjusted regularly if correction insulin is consistently being required. So we should be increasing on the prandial insulin, we should be increasing on the basal insulins. This is just an example of the basal bolus insulin regime. If the patient is already diabetic, stop all oral antidiabetics, start with the, say, like calculating the total daily dose on the basis of the patient's age, patient's other comorbidities, and the 50% of this dose can be given as a basal and then 50% as a nutritional insulin. Give basal insulin once like the glargine or detamir, or twice. We can, depending on the patient profile and depending on the patient's hyperglycemic status, and then adjust the insulin doses as per the blood glucose monitorings. This is like on the basis of that, what is the level of the plasma glucose? If we are doing every hourly, we can increase or decrease the dose. So to conclude, when the patient is being admitted or in the hospitalized on the Entyl or the Pyrazinamide formula, we should have a very regular capillary glucose monitoring for patients with diabetes, even for patients without diabetes, if the patient is receiving Entyl or the Pyrazinamide nutrition, because many of the time the patients are undiagnosed, undetected, or even the patient might develop the diabetes or patient might develop the hyperglycemia due to the stress. And we have seen very commonly in patients during COVID times when patients is admitted with the COVID on the steroids or were given the IV fluids. So the glucose monitoring can be discontinued in patients without a prior history of diabetes if the plasma glucose is less than 140 without insulin therapy for 24 to 48 hours following achievement of desired caloric intake. In patients with history of diabetes, insulin therapy should be initiated for the patient with the blood glucose more than 140. For those patients without a history of diabetes, insulin therapy is indicated if blood glucose is above 180 or in patients with persistent requirement for correction insulin. And we should know that the reduction in the carb content in order to lower blood glucose concentration, particularly in the patient of the TPM or even the enteral formulas. Frequent reassessment of the patient's clinical status is critical, not only to allow maintaining adequate glycemic control, but also prevent the hypoglycemia. That is more important, that we should be correcting hyperglycemia, but we should be avoiding hypoglycemia because that can also be dangerous. And yes, the further studies are needed to determine the safe and beneficial glycemic targets or the formulas wherein we can prevent the hyperglycemia in critically ill patients who are admitted and are on the Entyl or the Pyrazinamide formulas. Thank you very much for the patience hearing.